Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from or you're watching live from. This is the Speaker's Pulse, the show where public speaking actually matters. Every 2 weeks, we bring to you a conversation about public speaking. We sit together, showcase our skills, and we get the opportunity to sit around the fireplace, figuratively, and we talk about public speaking. We bring to you wonderful speakers that have actually done what will be talking about before, and they will share their knowledge, the wisdom of a long time of learning, and they bring it to you right at the comfort of your seat, your room, or wherever you are. Maybe you're now commuting home because maybe it's almost coffee time wherever you're tuning in from. We are very, very happy to have you. Thank you so much for joining in this evening. It is the Speaker's Pulse. Last 2 weeks, we did talk about how do we actually get our speakers, or how do you as a speaker get to convince the audience to deliver, to get into action, to do that you are calling them to do. This evening, we have another wonderful topic. We are talking about how do we prepare for the unprepared speeches? How do you prepare for or deliver the impromptu speeches? And tonight, I have brought yet another wonderful panel of the discussion where we have in fact, two wonderful friends of mine. One is Mr. Paul Kavuma, all the way from Uganda, and he is an entrepreneur. This gentleman over here has been an award winner, the best table topics speaker, and that actually, if you're joining in and you don't know what table topics is all about, it's just impromptu speaking. Therefore, let's call him the best impromptu speaker in the whole of East Africa. It's only safe to say. He's also an international speech contest winner, both of them for East Africa in this wonderful year of 2020. Surely the world will never forget Paul, just like the world will never forget 2020. We also have a wonderful diva, great friend of mine, great writer, and her name is Michelle. It's Miss Michelle Wanjiru. She is a bad. She likes to, so much humility with her, but I know she's a great speaker. She likes to say she's a budding public speaker, and those of you that know her, she's a wonderful writer. She's also a member of Toastmasters, just like three of us, and she's an immediate past president of her own club. This conversation is only brought to you so that we can learn how best to be public speakers, develop our confidence, especially when the world has written us off by giving us an impromptu speech, because that, in my own experience, has always been, as someone just setting me for failure. I don't have a good history with impromptu speaking, because if you've had me deliver an impromptu speech, chances are I will stammer for the first minute as I collect a few ideas on what to say. But don't you worry. Tonight, I will not be answering any impromptu speech. In fact, I will be only asking impromptu questions. That is not usually a hard task. Without further ado, I just want to thank you so much. I've already seen Edgar Davis. Thank you so much for joining in this conversation. I know you're joining in from wherever you are, so thank you so much. Davis, it's always wonderful to have you, and thank you again for gracing our day. If you're just new at this platform, the Speaker's Pulse, please subscribe, and let's always have you notified every minute or the moment we get live. And I suggest that since we have introduced a wonderful panel, let the game begin. I'll begin with you, Michelle. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation and being part of this conversation. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, about the work you do, and we'll pick it up from there. So, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Joshua. It's always nice to see you in action. And I'm so grateful to be here as well. What I'd say about myself really is that I am a girl of many talents. And presently, I am freelancing, I am writing, and I am also moderating events professionally. And so far, so good. And I can only credit this kind of success in this particular line of work to my membership at Toastmasters and through the developments and the skills I have learned at Toastmasters. I joined Toastmasters in October of 2018, which means this month will be my second year anniversary, or I don't know, second year celebrations at Toastmasters. And I think I really joined just because I wanted to. I thought I was a great speaker. I was actually sure that this was a space for me to show off. And I think one of the things we learn quickly when you join Toastmasters as a new member is that there is so much you do not know. And there's always so much you can improve. And so far, I think of all the contests I have participated in, I found table topics or impromptu speaking to be my forte. I just wish I had as much success as Paul Kavuma and have gotten to the districts and actually won at the district. But I kind of won at the area, if third place counts for anything. But other than that, I think, presently I'm also an environmentalist and a water professional, hoping to, diversify or rather follow that line of work moving forward. But presently, I'm enjoying my time as a professional moderator and a writer. Joshua?
Wow, what a person, what a lady of many talents. If you had a hat on, I would say you are a lady of many hats, but now that you don't, we'll stick with the lady of many talents. How about you, Paul? I literally know you as a man of many hats, like literally many hats. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself to our wonderful audience?
Thank you very much, Joshua. Good evening to you all, or good morning, just like Joshua's put it, depending on where you're listening in from. Thank you, Joshua, for having hosted me tonight as part of your show. So who is Paul Kavuma? Joshua says he's a man of many talents, or many hats, in other words. Well, I put on many hats. I started putting on the hat of Toastmaster in 2016, January. Before then, I was not that good at public speaking. I cannot say that I was even looking forward to being the best public speaker in East Africa. It was not my dream per se. But public speaking was actually a weakness. I was born and I grew up and I found out that I love drawing. I loved art. So I spent most of my childhood drawing, sitting alone and just drawing cartoons, drawing things. That led me to the field of architecture. I graduated as an architect. And because I was an introvert, it made me very good at what I did. Just sitting at the drawing table, coming up with ideas, not having to present them. I didn't want that part of the game. However, when I felt that I needed to actually start doing my own businesses, when I shared an idea with some friends of mine about how we can start a business, then came up the need of actually having to meet clients, sharing ideas with clients, selling your ideas to clients, even just building a team of people you're going to work with needed to be able to persuade them. So I realized I needed to improve my public speaking. So I made it mandatory to join and commit to Toastmasters. I joined Toastmasters in 2016. I gave my icebreaker speech around March 2016. And since then, I haven't looked back. I've made sure I try to attend as many meetings as possible and try to be able to speak, whether it's a prepared speech or an impromptu speech. And today, to be here as a Toastmasters East Africa champion in both prepared speech and impromptu speaking is a big deal for me because I know where it started from. I was not good at all. So that is Paul Kavuma, a
man of many hats. Now, if you're again watching from wherever you are, thank you so much for joining. I can see my good friend Justin. Thank you so much for joining. And ladies and gentlemen, we are here as proof to you that it doesn't matter where you come from, where you begin from. You can actually begin from the back desk as an introvert, drawing in, coming up with the ideas and not presenting them to all the way to being champion, all the way to being champion, just like Paul has actually shared with you. So this is a wonderful team. We are not coming to you as we will not say that we have always been great. In fact, you're perfect examples of imperfection. But the truth of the matter is, this conversation is about sharing with you the journey that we took to be able to be better. And these wonderful panelists that I have so much in stock for us. Again, thank you so much if you're joining the conversation from wherever you're joining. Now, I want us to go straight to the topic of tonight, which is the impromptu speaking. Oh, by the way, for the sake of those that have not been to Toastmasters, the icebreaker is the first speech you deliver in Toastmasters that simply tells you tell yourself, you introduce yourself to the fellow members, and this is usually your beginning point. As I say, that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. A journey of 1,000 speeches in Toastmasters usually begins with an icebreaker. Story for another day, my friends. I'd like us to go straight to the topic of tonight, which is impromptu speaking. How do we ace an impromptu speech? I like to begin by asking my wonderful panel here. I'll begin with you, Paul. What are impromptu speeches? I kind of think we've alluded to what they are, but how would you explain to a person that is joining in, has just had that the name for the first time or the word for the first time? And how do you help them differentiate the impromptu speech from an actual prepared speech? I kind of gave a hint in there, but go ahead, Paul.
Yes, Joshua. So what is an impromptu speech? An impromptu speech is one that you deliver off the cuff. Some say it's one that you actually don't prepare for. It just hits you and you have to find a way of getting out of it. However, I would like to say there's no speech you don't prepare for. Well, if you want to deliver a good speech, there's no speech you don't prepare for. So an impromptu speech is just one where you don't have as much time to prepare as a prepared speech. So in this case, usually, let me say it's a conversation and someone asks you a question, like Joshua has done. What is an impromptu speech? What happens is you use the first, I could say, 20 seconds to think about the response. So, and what distinguishes a great impromptu speech from one which is not so good is that first 20 seconds. It could turn out to be a 20 seconds of awkward silence, or you could find a way of buying time wisely by speaking before you actually start to answer the question, just like I have done. So an impromptu speech is simply one you deliver off the cuff, but with less time to prepare as compared to a prepared speech. And there are very many kinds that we come across. An example is just the one we're having right now. It could be at a desk with your boss. He asks you a question about how work is going or how far you've gone in achieving your target, and you have to respond. It could be during an interview, depending on which side you're seated, whether it's the side of the interviewer or the side of the interviewee. Either way, there is a time when you have to answer to an impromptu question. And so impromptu speaking is very vital in our lives. And it's something we cannot do away with. And the better you become at delivering impromptu speeches, I guess the better your life will get.
I agree. It's to some people, it's definitely a necessary evil. But to most of us, we know it's something, it's an opportunity we need to take advantage of. And surely it's going to show up, whether you know it or you don't know it, my friend. Now, I want to ask you, Michelle, do you have anything to add on what Paul said in terms of giving a clear comparison between a prepared and an impromptu speech? Or maybe
Sorry?
Or maybe add some examples to that?
Actually, all I was going to say is that Paul is actually very right. I think we always have something to say about whatever topic it is. However, with impromptu speaking, you just don't have enough time to arrange your thoughts. And so I think the trick becomes, how well do I arrange my thoughts and communicate powerfully? The only thing I would add is only that I think we all do. Everyday interactions involve some level of impromptu speaking. If you're in a relationship, this is a forte. Every so often, your significant other might ask you something you have no idea how to answer in a span of seconds, right? But also when you go to shop, when you go to the office, when you go to family gatherings, there'll always be that child who'll come and ask you about your opinion on something. There'll always be, if you, especially if you work in sales, especially, you'll find that you'll always have a customer who will ask you questions you have no idea how to, like you don't even prepare for them. You know the basic script of what you're studying, but now to convince them about one little detail that maybe is specific to them. And so I think impromptu speaking happens to us very often. I think the trick would be to gauge whether we're powerful communicators as we address these impromptu situations from time to time.
Absolutely. We definitely need to get used to answering them, prepare to master the skill. And that's why really we are here. We're hoping that at the end of the day, we'll be able to share with you some nuggets that we can use to be better impromptu speakers. But before we talk about maybe the purpose, why is it important to give it more attention? Because it could actually potentially break your career or even make your career or do some things really, really difficult or end a relationship, right? But I just want to ask you, have you ever had a situation where you struggled with impromptu speaking? Is that like a real life situation? Leave around the Toastmasters opportunities where they put us on spot and you're able to think on your feet. Is there any real life application where you felt, I think I could have done better, and as a result of you not doing very well, that maybe cost you something? So just wanted to ask you guys, and if the answer is no, it's okay, it's still okay. Yeah. So
I think,
yeah,
sorry?
Michelle, do you want?
Yeah, I was just gonna say
Yeah.
that one time I think I had senior people coming over to the office, and my immediate boss had stepped out briefly. I think when they came, I was aware that they would come, but I thought they would wait. However, they wanted to deal with the issue or at least broach the subject from the preliminary stages or early on conversations. And I think I really, really stumbled, like between confusing their title and really just repeating myself because I had no idea the extent to which I was supposed to speak, what do you say, politically correct to say, and how much I would have been exposing my immediate boss. And I think from that, what I learned is to know more about the organization. It's enough to do the bare minimum in terms of your job description. But if you are passionate about the organization you work with and you always want to be prepared, I learned from that to always ask questions well in advance so that I could be able to fit into any conversation. If I'm called quickly to a meeting, I don't want to say, oh dear, I don't know how to proceed or go telling lies. It's important to always know a few things about the organization, where you are, where you're going, who's doing what. Small things like that really go a long way. So I think from that situation, what I've learned is to always ask questions and to always know more.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Always ask questions, because the thing about impromptu speeches is you don't know when this question is going to come. So it's like a battlefield. It's going to going to the battlefield, and you don't know where the enemy is. You just have to be really equipped with the ability to answer. How about you, Paul? Any experience?
Lots of experiences. I I have more experiences at failing in impromptu situations than being successful at them. And actually, that's why I joined Toastmasters. So I remember there are very many instances as a child, even sitting in class, a teacher asks a question, and you're thinking of putting up your hand, but you don't know how to phrase the answer, but you know the answer. I mean, in an exam, it's easier to write the answer, you pass it. But if they are giving marks for participation in class, I could say I was almost one of the people who scored the least. I hated raising my hand because I just didn't know how to speak. You know, I was a person who I used to actually stammer a lot when I was growing up. So I did not like situations whereby I'm caught off guard. That's the worst way to speak to a person who stammers. So I had to find a way of making sure my thoughts have been well crafted out way before I start speaking. And one way I started to address that issue is actually journaling. Michelle, Michelle has shared about asking questions often, and that's quite similar to journaling because you're also taking note of a lot of things that pass you by. And at one point, you'll be asked to say or to share an opinion about something. And if you've journaled about it, then you actually have something to say about it. And it's easier for you then to actually craft a response or an opinion based on something that you have actually thought about. So for me, journaling has been one way of addressing the issue of impromptu speaking, and it has worked well so far.
So it's good that you're already sharing with us some tips to use, apply, both of you, when we are preparing for an impromptu speech. And thank you again for sharing your experiences, because I always think that we relate better when someone shares their own experience, because chances are someone is actually going through the same experience. So it's a great thing to be able to share that. And if you're joining in just right now, thank you so much for joining the Speakers Pulse. You just came at the right time, because we are actually talking about how do you prepare for unprepared speeches, or those impromptu speeches. It's such an oxymoron to think about how to prepare for the unprepared speeches. But then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I can see a good friend, Suna Joseph. Thank you so much for joining in. You're saying thank you. We have Edgar Davis already is saying, oh, excited about the topic, because you get ambushed to speak every now and then, and these tips will definitely come handy for you. Absolutely. I believe that we will be able to share some tips that will help you, Davis, in your day-to-day life. Again, if you're new to this home of public speaking, please feel free to subscribe. And if you're interested in more about public speaking, subscribe, so that we can always bring to you this material right at the comfort of your computer or your seat, if you like. Now, I'd like us to go a little bit up front and talk about the impromptu speeches more. Can we talk about the importance of being more prepared? And I know we'll talk about the tips on how to be prepared, but what are some of the things, or what are some of the values for any professional, leave alone? And I know there's always an opportunity for Toastmasters to focus so much on Toastmasters, because it's such a safe space. It's such a wonderful place for us to learn. You're free to fail, and people are always celebrating you that you've failed, but then show you where, no, they don't celebrate that you failed, but they celebrate the fact that you've attempted, and then you've been able to learn from your failures. So to me, Toastmasters is like such a safe haven. You make mistakes and you don't have so much direct impact on you. But in real life, in our day-to-day jobs, in our day-to-day professions, is there an opportunity for us to be, no, what is the opportunity for someone that is really well prepared when it comes to the impromptu speech? What are some of the opportunities or values? I'd like to ask you, Michelle, do you want to go first and share some of the advantages of being prepared for an impromptu speech?
No problem. I think very quickly you're able to stand out as a person who knows what they're doing, and you're more trusted in an organization, for example. I always say that every individual has a story to tell, and every individual has an opinion. Confidence might be the biggest challenge, because that's what stops us from going ahead and sharing our thoughts, our opinions, our views. But the beauty of preparation and the opportunity it presents us in the world is that every time there's a call by the universe, as they like to say, for you to create impact, for as long as you're prepared, you're able to honor that call. You're able to answer the call for more opportunity, for improving processes, for even just improving, or rather getting ahead in life for yourself. And so I have found, for me, the advantage of always being prepared is just the fact that you stand out and then you become a trusted person. And the beauty of that trust is that it also reflects inwardly to you. You're also able to trust yourself with what you have done, what you know, what you stand for. And if you even have a differing opinion or something that you don't agree with, you're able to voice that without also, I mean, there are ways to communicate a disagreement or a difference in position without also offending the other person. And I find the opportunity that impromptu speaking gives us is to be able to be tactful, powerful, effective communicators. I remember when I joined Toastmasters, I never used to read. In fact, I think I'd read probably a book every year. And now, because of Toastmasters and what I've, in fact, from Table Topics, somebody could ask you about current affairs. The Table Topics master could ask you about current affairs, and you are lost. And so I learned to just read more, know more. In fact, go a step further and ask people what they think about things. It can actually help you figure out where you stand. But really, it has been very, very helpful. Today, I read up to 15 books by June of every year. So I'm very proud of that. Yeah.
Listen, the world is definitely proud of you. 15 books. I struggle to do 6 books a year. I have to be honest. So thank you so much for sharing. I like the two main or key elements that you talked about. One, gaining trust, because the way we speak, our ability to communicate in any situation makes us or provides us with a great opportunity to be trusted. And the other one is you definitely stand up. They always say, "Oh, that one, we get him at any time," and they will just do it. So thank you so much, Michelle. And also the fact that it pushes you to do more, to even do better, even beyond the speaking aspect. Paul, is there anything, one or two more things you can add on that?
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Joshua. I agree with Michelle. And just to add, impromptu speaking, like Joshua, you already mentioned earlier, it's something that is inevitable in our lives. It happens every now and then, wherever you're working from, doesn't matter what your job is, you're always going to encounter a situation where you have to respond to a question, and yet you have not had enough time to prepare a response. And so if you're good at impromptu speaking, what happens is your audience gets to understand you much more clearer. Whatever call to action you're trying to make, whatever you're trying to ask your audience to do, whatever response you expect from your audience finds it easier to understand what you're trying to communicate, because you are good at impromptu speaking. And so it kind of gives you an edge over other people. It doesn't matter even if you don't know much about the subject matter sometimes, but just the way you respond to a question can actually tell your audience, well, I think I understand. I think I'll go with so and so. I think this is a much better leader. I think so and so will lead us to the right place because he has been able to respond to a particular question. And Michelle has also mentioned something which I just want to touch on a bit. Current affairs. You know, I find this funny. I don't know if it's a joke to everyone else. Current affairs is always changing. It's not always current. And so what do you do if your kind of impromptu question revolves about something that is always changing? If you're a member of Toastmasters, this is one of the skills that you actually get to learn, and you get to know how to respond to such questions. You don't always have to answer the exact question you've been given. However, you get to respond, and there's a difference. You may not answer the question, but your response can be worth much more than just a short answer. So if someone asks you, say, about, probably it could be about, okay, my car is not working, what do I do about it? And you're not a mechanic. But maybe you're a doctor and you'd say, I'm not a mechanic, but in medicine, you know, there's this thing called diagnosis. So you start by ruling out what is and what may not be the problem. So check, are the tires fine? Probably you can check, is the ignition starting? But you've answered it from what you are good at, not from the mechanic's point of view, but from your view as a doctor. So, and that's what impromptu speaking skills can help you with. You get to know how to respond to a question. You don't have to know everything, but your response always counts. And that's what great impromptu speakers are given an edge over others.
That's very true. And I love the fact that you talk about the difference between responding and answering directly to the question. Sometimes, by the way, the response comes very powerful and gives great context, and maybe it becomes a starting point for someone to find a solution, as opposed to, what's your name? My name is Joshua. And that's something I learned about in Toastmasters, that when they ask you, even if they ask you anything, please respond in any way. Please respond, because at the end of the day, we tend to think that that communication is all about just giving me the right, directly the right answer or the response. But sometimes, as you say, Paul, there's no right answer in some situations, but there's always a good response that is satisfactory. So thank you so much again, Paul, for that. Now, I know many people have been waiting for this part. How do you survive an impromptu speech? So I'm going to begin with you, Paul, because you recently survived one. And then I'll ask Michelle to add on in case there is one or two other things you can add. So do you want to go for this, Paul?
Yes, I actually survived quite a number, not just one. So how did I survive those many? All right. Like I already mentioned earlier, what I used to do when I joined Toastmasters, someone mentioned to me that you need to start journaling. You journal your thoughts. You may not be so disciplined in journaling daily, but try to journal as often as you can. Things that you look at and you get a second opinion about, things that you don't agree with much as everyone agrees with them. You just write your thoughts. And so what happens is over time they become part of what influences your opinion on a number of issues. So journaling is one of the ways in which you get to acquire a lot of information about different aspects. The other thing that I learned when I started taking on uh, pub impromptu speaking contests seriously, I'm going to share those. There are quite a number actually. I did not know you can actually prepare for an impromptu speech until I decided to start being serious at contesting. So what I learned, I think there are about five ways in which to approach an impromptu question. These, so far, I have applied them in a speech contest and they have worked. I have not applied many of them in a normal conversation, but I'm sure if they can work at a speech contest, they might as well work at any other ordinary conversation. Bridging. Bridging is something I could say that gets you from what you know to what you don't know. You get to bridge things. For example, if you're asked a question, like I just gave an example, I think if you're asked about COVID-19, for instance, what is the vaccine for COVID-19? This is a young child asking you, what is the vaccine? I mean, people are curing. What is the medicine? Look, you may not be a doctor. You've not even probably survived the disease yet. You may not know anyone suffering from it. But you could say, what I know is that some of the signs and symptoms of COVID-19 are flu and cough. And I have suffered from flu and cough before. So based on the fact that I have suffered from flu and cough before, I think one way in which the doctors are able to treat people suffering from COVID-19 is giving them medicine for flu and cough. So that's what bridging is. You don't know the actual answer to the question, but you can bridge from what you actually know so that you can relate back to the question. The other thing is just sharing your thought process. This worked for me I think it was at area level, where we were asked, the question was, a house is not a home. A house is not a home. First thing that came to my mind was the word house. And I had background of architecture. And so I started to share with them the thought process. I started to share with them what was actually going through my mind as I was answering the question. That helped me to buy time before actually answering the question. So I told them, so what is a house? If a house is not a home, then what a house? So I addressed what a house is, and I told them what my view of home should be. Then I answered that question, why a house cannot be a home. So I didn't want to approach the answer directly. I started with the thought process. What do I know about a house? A house has a foundation, it has walls, it has a brick, it has mortar. You want to answer that question, but you already started thinking. So instead of being silent, you might as well just share with them what you're thinking about. That's thought process. The other thing is being a moderator. Being a moderator. Yesterday, I watched the Lubowa Toastmasters Club table topics session. Their question was to to speak or not to speak. Obviously, since it's a Toastmasters meeting, everyone who spoke said, I would opt to speak instead of not to speak. And here is why. Everyone did that same thing. However, I kept thinking, if it was me in that situation, I know there's not enough time to think about your answer. But in questions whereby it's obvious that everyone is going to go on the other side, you can be the moderator and don't take a side. You just simply give your opinion of what it means to speak, what it means not to speak, and then you tell the audience it's always up to you to decide whether to speak or not. That way, it's not so boring, and people are given a fair share of the different sides of the question. It also kind of doesn't put you in a hard situation. You're not blocked into thinking of only one side. So you can play moderator. You don't take sides, you just give your opinion on this side of the question and on the other, and then you leave it up to the audience to judge. Then it could be a tall tale. You can just take extremes. You can over-exaggerate. This is what it comes in when you want to entertain and gain some people to laugh. You can over-exaggerate situations. And as people are laughing and as people are being carried away, you're actually thinking about the next thing you're going to say, because that is actually a trick. You have got to be thinking about the next statement before its time comes. So you have to buy time while thinking about the next statement. I could say that is more or less, those are the tricks I have learned so far in answering table topics question, and they have worked out so far so good. And if they can work in a table topics contest, they might as well work in a normal conversation. However, someone once told me, however, Paul, keep in mind that a table topics contest, you might avoid a question. However, if your boss wants a direct answer, it's not so good to always avoid the question. It may cost you a job. So you have to be wise when selecting how to respond. Yeah.
That is very key to mention. Always remember the context in which you're speaking. And the fact that you've applied these tips and you're still on this show, it means that you actually survived it. So thank you so much for sharing. Michelle, any ideas, any more additions, or any particular example or that point that is mentioned that you like to add value to?
Actually, Joshua, what I'm interested, or rather what I find so interesting is the fact that every day I learn something new. And Toastmasters are always such a source of great knowledge. Paul Kavuma, I will use that in future table topics contests, and I hope to win one time. For me, I think what I'd say in terms of, in our Toastmasters setting where we have actual competitions around impromptu speaking. I remember during our contest, our Area 4 contest, we were asked by the contest chair, what is that one thing that you have done and that you are not willing to do again? And I have so much to say about that, but it always goes back to what you're trying to do. I think one of the first things we cover when we are doing our first speeches, our first projects in Toastmasters is, why do we communicate? We communicate to educate, we communicate to entertain, we communicate to do many things that currently are not coming to my mind, but ideally the main ones would be educating and entertainment. And so with a question like that, you can tell you're gonna have much more fun around it. And so the easiest way to do is to first, one of the ways to buy time I have found is to always repeat the question back to the speaker. So I'm like, what is that one thing that I have done that I'm not willing to do again? And that buys you time, because at the back of your mind, your gears are turning and you have at least the first statement. So you, first of all, once you've answered that question, or then once you've re-echoed the question, you're able to give your opinion. I remember I said, I am currently president and I will never be president again. So it was very easy for me to draw from something that was, actively in my life. And I think what I wanted to show at the time was, to educate that being president is nice, don't get me wrong, but it's also hard work. And because of how tired I was, I think in the moment, I was also communicating just how how that question had found me. I was still, working through it. I think if you ask me that question now again, I have a different position. But really, that's the beauty of communication, that you can communicate one thing today and also inform it tomorrow. And so change your answer tomorrow, because that then shows that ideas, opinions are always changing. And the beauty of communication is to strike when the iron is hot. At the moment, what are you required to do? You're required to show up. And how are you showing up? So you give your answer. And once you have either more enlightenment or more information, you're able to change your position. The point is, communication happens and you're always getting new information. So once you've given your position, then you have to accompany it with an example. I remember I made jokes about how my exco was driving me crazy and that I had discovered what it feels to be stood up at a date because my officers were standing me up to our date. And so that really gives context and reinforces your opinion and makes you an authority on the subject. Again, this is a horrible example, but it's a fun example. I had too much fun with this question. And lastly, the beauty is to also not speak too much, because then that way you'll be saying so much. And they say the more you speak, the more you say nothing. And so I found that the last part would be to summarize and say, it is because of this reason. I am currently president and I will not be president again. That really just helps you reinforce your message, and you will have done it in probably under 1 minute or under 2 minutes, which really makes your point come across either way. I've also found that I have two ways that a question will find me. I will either be in the know or I wouldn't know something. And so sometimes you say there's something you know that you know, then there are the things you know you don't know, and there are the things you don't know you don't know. And I think the beauty of knowing, of being prepared, is it gives you a chance to also communicate powerfully your position and new information. But where you don't know, it's a very controversial tip, but I will share it nonetheless. If you cannot convince them, confuse them. I always say, at least if you have a question, and just to re-echo what Paul Kavuma said, you can actually take a departure from the question and answer it in your own way. The point is, you have responded. You will not have kept quiet and said, I don't know. I think the beauty of impromptu speaking is to empower you to go into the world and avoid saying, I don't know. When I hear I don't know from somebody else, it means that they're not willing to try, or they're waiting for some. It always gives a different impression, and it's not an impression that you'd like to give, where it almost seems that either you don't care, or you don't read as much, or you don't know as much, you don't ask more questions, or anything along those lines. The goal is for you to always, you can even say, I don't know, but have a comeback, have something that is anchoring you to the next step. And so for me, I found that when I don't know something, I'll take you where I know, and hopefully I will find you in the corner of what you asked me.
Yeah. Those are really, really interesting additions, Michelle. I agree with you. I am one of the tips I always use is repeat the question and buy time. As I'm thinking about the answer quickly, I do that. I also love the idea of bridging, as Paul mentioned. I recently was I was not recently, really. It was in 2014, and I was asked about. I think I was asked about Ebola, and I had no idea about Ebola, and I talked about malaria, and then I talked about a lot about malaria, and then I connected with Ebola. These are two different diseases, really, if you know what these are. But at least the message for me was I was able to put across the message. So the idea sometimes, and I agree with you, Michelle, sometimes our situations require a yes or no type of answer, but in most cases, they expect a response from you that is satisfactory. And sometimes giving yes or no does not give a good context. And that's why it's important, as you share these tips, both of you, to think about giving a proper context, and at least, hopefully, along the way, the message will be satisfactory and someone can build on that and move on. So there's a question already. I want to first of all recognize our wonderful viewers tonight. I think this is our fellow Toastmaster, Patricia Nanteza. Thank you so much for joining. You say very interesting topic and great lessons. Well done. Thank you so much. We have Joseph who came. He has a question. He said, what can you do if you are chosen maybe to speak about something you completely do not know about? And I think we alluded to it I'll ask maybe one of you guys to answer that. We have Brenda Atwine. Thank you so much. I like the move. So yeah, you said you like it. The more you speak, the more you speak nothing. Oh yeah, someone is appreciating Michelle, who said that the more you speak, actually, the more you speak nothing. Someone said that great speakers are great liars, or great talkers are great liars. I'm not going to go into that since I am one of those bubbly people. You have Deo, who is saying that, Paul, congratulations, you truly are a champion of impromptu speech and great tips that you've shared. Dale has one question though. Is it okay to ask questions for more clarifications before responding? And I'm going to ask this question to you, Paul. Is it okay to ask for clarification before responding? And then Michelle, I'll ask you to answer the question from Joseph, who says that what can you do if you're asked to talk about something you have no idea about? I feel like you talked about it, but maybe it's good to say one or two things to emphasize it for Joseph. Or maybe he asked it before you answered it. But it's always fair not to leave any stone unturned. Then, Paul, I'll ask you to answer the question that Dale asked, can you actually ask for clarification? So, Michelle, do you want to go first?
No problem. To that question, when you're asked about something that you have no idea about, I think in Toastmasters, we are encouraged to always, like, as I said, if you can't convince them, confuse them. And that's neither here or there. But I think in professional settings, there's a lot more that is required and expected. I think one tip I would say is acknowledge that you don't know, especially where it is something that you really cannot wiggle your way out of, but always give a reassurance. Let the other person know where your position is. So for example, I have found myself being asked questions about astrophysics. I'm not an physicist, but it doesn't mean that I can go and learn about it. So you could probably just say, I think at this moment, I cannot answer your question as you answered. Is it possible for you to give me time? I will get back to you with a few answers. That is if there's window for that. If there's no window for that, I guess you say you don't know and still say, I'm willing to learn and I hope I haven't disappointed you. But usually what I say is, there's also you're given room to redeem yourself. So you can just simply say, I'm not an authority on the subject. This is my opinion. However, if you need a more verifiable answer, allow me some time to do some research, do some consultations, and I will get back to you before the end of the day or within an hour. Just cover your tracks as well.
Thank you so much. It's always good. I always like to say that honesty is the best policy. When things get tough, just go ahead and be honest so that you can go through life. Paul, Deo says to say that, sometimes people might take it in a wrong way when you ask questions for clarification. So is it always a good thing to ask for clarification whenever you're not sure? Paul.
Okay, I'm going to answer this in two ways. One, if it is a Toastmasters meeting, usually we have been trained in all Toastmasters meetings that when you are given a table topic, you answer depending on how you have understood it. So especially if it is a contest, you want to be given an opportunity to ask the question to be read out to you again. However, it will be read to you twice before you respond. And one of the aspects that we are trained or encouraged to practice at Toastmasters is listening skills. So you must try and be able to listen clearly to each word that is being read out in the question, such that when it's your turn to answer, you're able to answer directly responding to the question and not what you think the question was. So in Toastmasters, I don't think it's okay to ask for them to read the question again. You just simply have to respond depending on what you have heard. Sometimes it could work out in your favor if you have a good thought process. If the way you respond is clear, if there's an introduction, a body, and a clear call to action. Even if you've answered offside, the fact that you've responded and you have those boxes ticked, there's a good introduction. Your body has facts and figures and illustrations to back up your ideas, and your call to action for your audience is clear. It will earn you the points. Now, if the second answer, if it is a real life situation, say you are You are at the workplace and your supervisor asks you a question. You may not want to answer just depending on what you think you have had. It's always okay to say, I beg you a pardon. And even if he asks you the question another 3 times and you're sure you've heard clearly, but you have no answer to the question, you're not sure about the answer to the question. Like Michelle has said, it's always good to say, I don't know for now how to respond to you. However, you follow it up. What I know, what I've come to learn is that your thought process is key, and that is what they mark at Toastmasters, and that is what is very applicable in life. Your thought process is key. Much as you may say, yes, that's correct, or no, that's not correct, or I understand, or I do not understand the question. What you then back up that with always shows your audience whether you are being confident about what you're saying, whether you're being sincere or not. So your thought process is always key. You might say, I don't know if our sales are going to go up next month. But what I can promise you is, one, we are going to put in all the work. We are going to visit as many prospects as possible. We are going to call as many possible clients as we can. We shall be sharing with you reports every 3 days. And based on that, I'm sure we might be able to hit the sales targets. So you've not answered a yes, but based on the thought process, someone can tell that you're actually giving a good response.
Thank you so much, Paul. I feel like that's very true. People are not just in search of a yes or no situation. Sometimes, like I mentioned, providing the proper context, and especially your boss, really yes or no might not be helpful. In fact, may prompt another question. So be prepared and give them the context that they may need. Michelle, do you have something to add to that?
I just wanted to reinforce what Paul was saying, that it's true. Sometimes your thought process is most important as you deliver what you're saying. And just to say again, I think it's better for you to be known for giving true information than to be known as somebody who is confident on the spot, but probably gives inaccurate information. Because what that does is that most people will just move away from asking you questions altogether. But if you come out and clearly say, at the moment, I don't know, I have to do some more research or give me some time, you are not only are you showing up as an honest person, you're also dependable. And I think most people would rather a reliable person than a liar. So just to reinforce what Paul was saying.
That's a very good point. Okay, like we've been saying earlier on, honesty is always a winner. It's always good to be remembered for telling the truth, for being honest, for being transparent, than being known for the other. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about smartness or ability to respond on spot. It's also ability to contribute to the general picture. Because you see, communication is not a standalone. It's actually a piece in a big moving body of professionalism, of being a good member in the society. So the ability to be honest also is something that people are going to be looking at you or hoping that you're going to measure up in that regard. Well, once again, I want to appreciate a wonderful audience, a wonderful viewers for spending some time with us and tuning in. And some of you have actually participated in the conversation. I can see my very good friend, the Black. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. We have Priska. She actually agrees with you, Michelle, that if you can't convince them, then confuse them, you know? So yeah, that's an interesting. Thank you so much again, Priska, for being part. We have another question from Diane Musi. She's like, what if you don't understand? We have no idea about the grammar used in this question. I don't know. Mean that this person is trying to use, Shakespeare type of English, or it is any other thing. But Paul, what do you do when someone is expecting you to answer, but they are also using Shakespeare type of English? We've heard of the likes of Mukasambide, and we've also heard of the likes of this Nigerian politician. What do you do in such a situation? And the answer, and that's your boss asking you.
the first statement that comes out of your mouth must show your understanding of what he has asked. So that everything that you build after that is in relation to your first statement, not to what you think he has said. So if he has used a lot of jargon and you know you've not understood anything he has said, but you have to respond, the first statement should be, from what you have said, I think what you meant to find out is probably how did I spend my day yesterday? And I can share with you a few stories about how I spent my day yesterday. So then you go on with the rest of your speech. So that shows that you're answering what you think he asked, not what you probably misunderstood. So even his response after your response will be based on what you have said, not what you thought he was asking, which is good. Which also reminds me of something I want to share. The openings, the opening of your speech is very crucial. The way you introduce your speech is very crucial. It can either be a buy-in or it could fail you. It could help your audience. Your audience could buy into what you're saying, or they could neglect what you're saying. So the way you open your speech is very crucial. And there are some openings which I've come across and I try to use as much as I can. For instance, you can start with a story. If you want to sell an idea, but you don't want to come off as probably offensive to the other person, you can start open with a story and say, picture this. There is a village out there where people wake up every day and they don't know where they're going to find their first meal. Okay. So let me say maybe say you're an MP and you're trying to get resources for a certain village, and you know this person not going to give you the resources. So you don't start off by asking for the resources. Your first statement should be creating a picture of what you're trying to solve. So then your call to action comes at the very end, and it's clear why you're actually asking for the resources. It's because you're trying to help a poor village of people who don't know where to get their food from. So you see, so your first statement is always important. Another thing you can use is, if you are like me, for example, there's a question Michelle shared of, I've forgotten the question already, something to do with
the one thing you never do again.
The one thing never do again, yes. You could say, if you are like me, then you answer the question. Why that is smart is only those who are like you have to agree with you, and that is okay, because not everyone is like you. So it's a smart way of actually saying, I'm answering the question depending on what I have understood, or depending on who I am. And the other thing that you could use, so those are three. The third one is what we can all agree on. There's the way that gains the audience's, everyone starts to nod their head. Even before you mention what it is they agree on, you say, what we can all agree on, by the way, is the fact that Africa has been fighting wars since time immemorial. Everyone's already nodding their heads before even starts, stating the facts and figures to back that up. So those are some three openings, just to show you that the way you open your speech is crucial. The opening is always important.
Indeed, and even general speeches. We talked about this a few weeks ago about how do you begin your speech. And if you start with a story, Brené Brown, one of my best writers, she say that a story is data with a soul. There's a way that we all connect to the story, and especially if you want to communicate abstract or, as you mentioned, rather difficult topics to talk about. A story is such a wonderful way to begin. And the two other ways that you've mentioned, of if you are like me, or what we can agree all together, invites us as listeners to see, actually, because we are social beings, human beings are social animals, and we are always longing for that opportunity to belong and find someone to agree with you. And so when someone talks about something that you identify with, and you hear someone say, right, me too, and that becomes a great point of connection. The moment you get that reaction of, I've always thought about that. I don't know why I've never said it. So that gives you a great opening into, it's like someone entering your bus. Like you've opened the door and someone enters your bus, you're able to go together. So thank you so much, Paul, for those wonderful ways that we can actually begin our speeches with. My friends, we've come towards the end of the evening and there's so much more to talk about. Thank you so much again, Dewo. I think, Dewo, you're busy responding to what Diane asked. I want to thank you so much, Njoroge, for joining. He says, Paul, kindly repeat on what to answer when one did not get the question correctly. And Musi Diane is saying, thank you so much. My question is well answered. So I think Njoroge wants Paul to repeat on what you answer and what you do when someone when you don't understand the when you didn't get the question correctly. Paul, do you want to do the honors of helping Njoroge understand? I think I have a feeling Njoroge is a toastmaster and would like to hear it from the horse's mouth. So the question is again, Paul, can you repeat on what to answer when one did not get the question correctly? That surely has to be a member of Toastmasters asking for the next table topics contest.
Yeah, sure. Sure. Just to summarize, I said the first statement that comes out of your mouth is actually very important, depending on what you've had. Because uh, Joshua gave an example. We have a member of parliament here in Uganda called Mukasa Mbide. He uses very, very difficult English language. Sometimes you listen to his speeches and you wonder, okay, is this English? Then you Google the word and you actually find it's an English word. And you're like, wow, word of the day. He always does the word of the day. So what happens if such a person probably is your line manager, and every time he asks a question, you somehow do not understand, but you have to respond. So, like I said, the first statement that you say should reinforce what you have understood. If he asks a question you have not understood, the first statement that comes out of your mouth should reinforce the fact that you've understood it differently, or what you've understood. So you could say, from what you've asked, I think what you're trying to find out is ABCD. Then you continue. So that shows that you're answering based on what you think you've understood. So the first statement is important in answering a question that you've not understood. It is better than, actually, this happened at Kampala Toastmasters Club last year. I was in the audience, they asked a question. It was a very funny question. The question was long. It was, and an old lady stood up from the grave and said, that's so far, that has been the most difficult question. I told myself, goodness, thank God I'm not, in that position. So one of the members actually started speaking. Then halfway, he said, I actually do not know the question I'm answering. I've already forgotten the question I'm answering. But all I'm trying to tell you is, and that is really towards the end. He has already confused us. It's always important you start the opening with how you've understood the question. How you have understood the question. Such that the audience then knows how you are approaching the question. That is important because even the strategies for responding are different. It will help the audience understand whether you agree or you disagree. The first question is important. I can give an example. This is something I've already mentioned earlier. At area level, we're asked to respond to a house is not a home. I think there's someone who understood it as a house is not hope or something like that. However, they went on with a question and they were saying something totally, I don't know what. Then towards the end, they stated that is why a house is not hope. Then I think for me, I was like, oh gosh. So I was thinking what is going through the jury's mind right now. What you should do when you think you've misheard the question and you cannot ask the other person to repeat, the first statement should show where you stand. You could say, yes, I agree with you. Or if you are like me, or from what I understand, maybe you're trying to find out why I did not do ABCD. Then you build on that introduction. The introduction is always important.
The introduction is always a good, in fact, a good introduction begets a good speech or perhaps a memorable speech. I know, Michelle, you've had situations of the kind. Anything to add?
I like what Paul is sharing, that mostly, and I like that he really features what we do at Toastmasters, which is fantastic. However, I think just to reinforce and also add on to, for Njoroge's benefits, I think what I found, one time I found myself on a panel discussion, and it was around the construction industry, and I had just become a project manager. And I found that there were questions about technology I had no idea about. And so you're in a panel discussion, it's proper impromptu. You have an audience waiting for an answer. And the worst thing you can see in a panel discussion is, I don't know. And so what I found that also helps when you don't understand the question, in a setting like that, for example, you just simply say, give a generalized answer. So yes, there are many improvements happening right now in terms of technology, and our organization has been working towards understanding them more. So we're doing more research, and we will publish our findings and share in a newsletter what we are going with, but we are considering all our open options. The goal here is to also be clear about who you represent and why it is important for you, on what kind of image you are trying to put forth for, say, an organization or for your own brand. And so what I found from that situation is also that you can simply say, this question requires a long discussion and we don't have time. Can we meet at the end of this session? Thank you.
That you dodge the question. Indeed, you dodge the question swiftly without confusing anyone and give them a whole answer at the end of the day. So thank you so much, Michelle, for that great addition. Absolutely, I believe that it's something that would help people be better and help them answer the question in the right way possible. So thank you so much once again for that. We have come to the end of our conversation, and it's been a wonderful opportunity to have both of you tonight and share so much with me and our wonderful audience. I'd like to say thank you again to our wonderful audience for making time and asking your questions all through. I know that there's a friend of mine that is a great fan of Paul, and he said that it's always wonderful to see, Paul, that all your speeches were exciting in the contest, and she said that you deserve really to win the two contests. So thank you again. And Grace. So thank you so much, Grace, for that. I hope that you have had value for your time in this evening. Again, if you are just coming in, please feel free to subscribe to our channel so that you get more information. And again, if you missed the conversation, don't you worry, it's going to be recorded and you will get an opportunity to revisit and learn the nuggets our wonderful panelists this night were able to share. Again, we will be able to meet in a fortnight, in about 2 weeks' time, that's what I mean, and we'll have another great conversation in the area of public speaking. Until then, please take good care of yourself. Continue to watch a few episodes that we've had if you like to have more about public speaking. Until then, this will always be the Speaker's Pulse. Thank you so much and have a lovely night.
Thank you.
You